Discovery and Rescue. Dr. Emmett Hawthorne wiped the sweat from his brow. The twin suns of Kepler 442 bits beating down mercilessly on his weathered skin. At 72 years old, he was long past retirement age, but his passion for xenobotany had driven him to this distant world on the edge of human-explored space. The lush alien flora surrounding him more than made up for the discomfort of the harsh climate. As he carefully collected samples of a vibrant purple fern-like plant, his well-trained ears picked up an unusual sound. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but distinctly out of place in the otherwise quiet forest. Curiosity piqued. Emmett slowly rose to his feet, joints creaking in protest. "Hello," he called out, his voice rough from disuse. The sound grew slightly louder, a soft, rhythmic whimper that tugged at his heart. Following the noise, Emmett pushed through the dense undergrowth, his sample case forgotten in his urgency. After several minutes of careful navigation through the alien terrain, Emmett stumbled into a small clearing. What he saw there stopped him dead in his tracks. Curled up at the base of a massive tree-like structure was a small, trembling figure. It was clearly not human, its skin a pale, translucent blue that seemed to shimmer in the dappled sunlight. Emmett's scientific mind raced, cataloging details even as his humanity urged him forward. The creature was small, perhaps the size of a human child. Its body was vaguely humanoid, with 2 arms and 2 legs, but its head was elongated, with no visible ears and large, liquid black eyes that blinked up at him in fear and confusion. "It's all right," Emmett said softly, holding up his hands in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. "I won't hurt you." The alien child, for Emmett was now certain it was indeed a child, let out a series of clicks and whistles that he couldn't begin to understand. But the fear in its eyes was unmistakable. As Emmett took a cautious step forward, he noticed the angry red gash on the child's leg, oozing a silvery fluid he assumed was blood. "You're hurt," he murmured, his heart aching at the sight. "Let me help you." Slowly, carefully, Emmett approached the alien child. He kept his movements deliberate and non-threatening, speaking in a low, soothing tone. "My name is Emmett. I'm a friend. I want to help." The child's large eyes never left him, tracking his every move. As Emmett knelt beside the injured alien, he was struck by how frail it looked. Its body was rail-thin, ribs clearly visible through its translucent skin. Whatever had happened to this child, it had clearly been alone and starving for some time. Emmett reached for his pack, pulling out a first aid kit. The alien child flinched at the sudden movement, letting out a high-pitched keening sound that made Emmett's heart clench. "Shay, it's okay," he soothed. "This will help." With gentle hands, Emmett cleaned the wound on the child's leg. The alien tensed at first, then gradually relaxed as it realized Emmett wasn't causing further harm. As he worked, Emmett's mind raced with questions. Where had this child come from? Where were its parents? How had it ended up alone and injured on this remote planet? Once the wound was cleaned and bandaged, Emmett sat back on his heels, studying the alien child. Its eyes were drooping now, exhaustion clearly taking over now that the immediate danger had passed. Making a quick decision, Emmett shrugged off his outer jacket. "Come on, little one," he said softly. "Let's get you somewhere safe." To his surprise, the alien child didn't resist as he gently wrapped it in his jacket. It was alarmingly light in his arms as he stood, cradling it close to his chest. The child's skin was cool to the touch, and Emmett could feel its rapid heartbeat, or what he assumed was a heart, fluttering against his own. As Emmett began the long trek back to his research station, his mind was already racing ahead. He had basic medical supplies there, and food. Though he had no idea what this alien child could safely eat, he'd have to contact the nearest human outpost for help, but that was days away at best. Looking down at the small, vulnerable creature in his arms, Emmett felt a fierce surge of protectiveness. "Don't you worry," he murmured. "I'll take care of you." The alien child's eyes fluttered open briefly at the sound of his voice. For a moment, those impossibly deep black eyes locked with Emmett's faded blue ones. Then, to his amazement, the child snuggled closer, one small hand gripping the front of Emmett's shirt. As he walked through the alien forest, cradling this unexpected charge, Dr. Emmett Hawthorne felt more alive than he had in years. He didn't know what challenges lay ahead, but he knew with absolute certainty that his life had just changed forever. In a lush green garden, under a canopy of trees and structures, a kind old man kneels down to offer food to a small blue-skinned alien girl with white hair. The man is dressed in futuristic protective gear, while the alien girl wears simple beige clothing. The setting is serene and filled with vibrant plant life, suggesting a nurturing environment. The scene captures a moment of compassion and care, highlighting the bond forming between the old man and the alien girl as she finds a new home. Building trust. The first few days were a whirlwind of activity and anxiety for Dr. Emmett Hawthorne. His unexpected alien guest, whom he had started calling Starlight due to the way its skin seemed to shimmer, was a constant source of wonder and worry. Emmett's computer had provided some basic information on the child's probable nutritional needs based on its observed physiology. To his relief, Starlight seemed able to consume a nutrient-rich broth he concocted from local plant matter. The alien child drank greedily, and with each passing day, its skin took on a healthier, more vibrant blue hue. Communication, however, remained a significant challenge. Starlight's language consisted of clicks, whistles, and trills that Emmett's universal translator couldn't begin to decipher. For its part, the alien child seemed equally baffled by Emmett's attempts at speech. On the third day, as Emmett was changing the bandage on Starlight's leg, he had a breakthrough. The child reached out, placing one of its 6-fingered hands on Emmett's wrinkled cheek. Suddenly, Emmett's mind was flooded with a cascade of images and emotions: fear, confusion, gratitude, and an overwhelming sense of loss. Gasping, Emmett jerked back, his eyes wide. Starlight quickly withdrew its hand, making a series of apologetic-sounding clicks. "It's okay," Emmett said, his voice shaky. "You just surprised me. Can you do that again?" Hesitantly, Starlight reached out once more. This time, Emmett was prepared for the rush of sensations. He saw flashes of a world with purple skies and towering crystalline structures. He felt the warmth of what he assumed was Starlight's family, followed by terror as strange, dark ships appeared in the sky. The last image was of Starlight, alone and afraid, in a small escape pod hurtling through space. As the connection faded, Emmett found tears streaming down his cheeks. "Oh, little one," he murmured, gathering Starlight into a gentle hug. "I'm so sorry." The alien child stiffened at first, then gradually relaxed into the embrace. Emmett felt a small hand pat his back awkwardly, as if Starlight was trying to comfort him in return. From that moment on, their relationship shifted. Starlight became more open, more curious about its surroundings. It would often toddle after Emmett as he went about his daily tasks, its large eyes taking in everything with wonder. Emmett, for his part, found himself talking constantly, narrating his actions and explaining the various pieces of equipment in his small research station. He had no idea how much Starlight understood, but the sound of his voice seemed to soothe the alien child. As the days turned into weeks, they developed a form of nonverbal communication. Starlight would touch Emmett's hand to share images or emotions, while Emmett used a combination of gestures and simple drawings to convey his meaning. One afternoon, as they sat outside the research station watching the twin suns set, Starlight suddenly perked up. It pointed excitedly at the darkening sky, then touched Emmett's hand. In his mind, Emmett saw a series of constellations he didn't recognize, followed by a sense of longing so powerful it took his breath away. "That's your home, isn't it?" Emmett asked softly. Starlight nodded, a gesture it had picked up from him. "Do you want to go back?" The alien child's response was a jumble of conflicting emotions: hope, fear, sadness, and a deep affection that Emmett realized was directed at him. Starlight had come to see him as a protector, maybe even as a surrogate parent. Emmett's heart clenched. He knew he should be trying to find a way to return Starlight to its people, but the thought of parting with the child was more painful than he cared to admit. In just a few short weeks, this strange, wonderful creature had filled a void in his life he hadn't even known existed. "We'll figure it out," he promised, putting an arm around Starlight's small shoulders. Together. As the stars came out, twinkling in unfamiliar patterns, Emmett found himself humming an old Earth lullaby. Starlight leaned against him, its eyes drifting closed. The peacefulness of the moment was shattered by a sudden, piercing alarm from inside the research station. Emmett jumped to his feet, scooping up a startled Starlight in his arms. "What in the world?" he muttered, hurrying inside. The main computer screen was flashing red, displaying a warning he had never expected to see. "Unknown vessel APPROISHISHING. Time to PLANETFAL. 6 HOURs. Starlight, sensing Emmett's alarm, began to tremble. It touched his cheek, sharing a vision of the dark ships that had attacked its homeworld. "No," Emmett breathed, his blood running cold. "They found us." In that moment, looking down at the frightened alien child in his arms, Dr. Emmett Hawthorne made a decision. He might be old, he might be just a botanist, but he would do whatever it took to protect Starlight. "Don't worry," he said, his voice firm with resolve. "I won't let them take you." As the warning klaxon continued to blare, Emmett's mind raced. He had 6 hours to come up with a plan to outsmart an advanced alien race. It was impossible, crazy, and completely necessary. For the first time in years, he found himself grinning in the face of danger. "Well, Starlight," he said, setting the child down and moving to gather supplies. "Looks like we're in for quite an adventure." Starlight chirped questioningly, head tilted to one side. "Oh, you'll see," Emmett replied, his eyes twinkling with a mixture of fear and excitement. "Your old human friend here still has a few tricks up his sleeve." As he spoke, Emmett was already formulating a plan. It was risky, perhaps even foolhardy, but it was their only chance. With determination in his heart and Starlight by his side, he set to work. The next 6 hours would determine not just their fate, but potentially the fate of 2 species. The clock was ticking, and the greatest challenge of Dr. Emmett Hawthorne's life was about to begin. Threat from the stars. The 6 hours that followed were a blur of frantic activity. Emmett's mind, sharpened by years of scientific problem-solving, worked overtime as he prepared for the arrival of the unknown alien vessel. "Okay, Starlight," Emmett said, kneeling down to meet the alien child's wide, anxious eyes. "I need you to show me everything you can remember about the ships that attacked your world. Can you do that for me?" Starlight nodded, placing a small 6-fingered hand on Emmett's cheek. Immediately, his mind was flooded with images. Sleek, dark ships that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Weapons that fired beams of intense cold, freezing everything they touched. And tall, spindly beings with multiple limbs and faces hidden behind opaque masks. As the vision faded, Emmett took a deep breath, processing the information. "Thank you," he said softly, giving Starlight a reassuring smile. "That helps a lot." With renewed purpose, Emmett set to work. He might be outgunned and outnumbered, but he had 2 significant advantages: home turf and the element of surprise. The hostile aliens, whoever they were, wouldn't be expecting resistance from a lone human scientist. First, Emmett rigged up a series of remote sensors around his research station, using parts cannibalized from his less essential equipment. These would give him early warning of the aliens' approach and help him track their movements. Next, he turned his attention to potential defenses. His options were limited, but Emmett was nothing if not resourceful. Using his knowledge of the local flora, he concocted a potent mixture of plant toxins that, while harmless to humans and hopefully to Starlight species, might prove debilitating to the invaders. As he worked, Emmett kept up a running commentary, partly to soothe Starlight's nerves and partly to organize his own thoughts. You see, little one, sometimes the best weapon is the one your enemy doesn't expect. They'll be looking for advanced technology, not simple botanical tricks. Starlight watched him intently, occasionally offering chirps of encouragement or handing him tools with its delicate fingers. Despite the gravity of their situation, Emmett couldn't help but feel a surge of pride at how quickly the alien child was learning and adapting. With less than an hour to go before the estimated arrival of the alien ship, Emmett made final preparations. He packed a bag with supplies, including food, water, and medical equipment. Then he turned to Starlight with a serious expression. "Listen carefully," he said, speaking slowly and clearly while using gestures to reinforce his words. "When the bad ones come, we hide. Stay quiet. Follow me. Understand?" Starlight nodded solemnly, its large eyes reflecting a mix of fear and trust. Emmett felt a lump form in his throat. This brave little being had already been through so much, and now it was relying on him, a retired botanist way out of his depth, for protection. Just then, one of Emmett's jury-rigged sensors began to beep insistently. He rushed to the computer terminal, Starlight close on his heels. The screen showed a large object entering the planet's atmosphere, descending rapidly towards their location. "They're early," Emmett muttered, his heart racing. "All right, Starlight, it's time to go." Scooping up the alien child in one arm and the supply bag in the other, Emmett headed for the airlock. Just before he opened it, he paused, looking down at Starlight's frightened face. "I promise you," he said softly, "I will do everything in my power to keep you safe." Starlight reached up, touching Emmett's cheek. A wave of gratitude and affection washed over him, along with a sense of determination that matched his own. In that moment, Emmett knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. As they stepped out into the alien twilight, the sky above them lit up with an ominous glow. The invaders' ship, just as dark and menacing as in Starlight's memories, was descending through the atmosphere, heading straight for the research station. Emmett didn't waste a second. Carrying Starlight, he sprinted for the cover of the dense alien forest. His old bones protested the sudden exertion, but adrenaline and determination drove him forward. Behind them, he heard the ominous hum of the alien ship growing louder. Just as they reached the tree line, a blinding light illuminated the area around the research station. Emmett dove behind a large fern-like plant, holding Starlight close to his chest. Through the gaps in the foliage, he watched as the alien ship landed in the clearing near his station. The ship's outer hull seemed to ripple and shift, as if it wasn't entirely solid. A hatch opened silently, and several tall, multi-limbed figures emerged. Their movements were unnaturally fluid, almost graceful, as they began to systematically search the research station and its surroundings. Emmett held his breath, feeling Starlight tremble against him. He gently stroked the child's head, trying to provide comfort while keeping absolutely still. His mind raced, evaluating options and discarding them just as quickly. They couldn't stay here indefinitely, but moving risked detection. Suddenly, one of the alien invaders turned its masked face in their direction. Emmett's blood ran cold as he realized they must have some way of detecting life signs. His clever traps and botanical weapons seemed woefully inadequate in the face of such advanced technology. As the alien began to move towards their hiding spot, Emmett made a split-second decision. He set Starlight down, looking into its large, frightened eyes. "Run," he whispered, pointing deeper into the forest. "I'll distract them. Go." Starlight hesitated, clearly reluctant to leave him. Emmett's heart swelled with affection, but there was no time for sentiment. He gave the alien child a gentle push, then stood up, deliberately making noise to draw the invaders' attention. "Hey there," he called out, his voice steadier than he felt. "I don't suppose you'd like to discuss this over a cup of tea." As the alien invaders turned towards him, their weapons raising, Emmett caught a glimpse of Starlight disappearing into the underbrush. He allowed himself a small smile of triumph. Whatever happened next, at least the child was safe for now. Then the aliens were upon him, their cold, expressionless masks mere inches from his face. Emmett squared his shoulders, determined to buy Starlight as much time as possible. He might be old, he might be outnumbered and outgunned, but he wasn't going down without a fight. "All right, gentlemen," he said, a hint of his old mischievous spark in his eyes. "Let's see what you've got." As the aliens closed in, Emmett felt a curious mix of fear and exhilaration. He had no idea how this confrontation would end, but one thing was certain. The greatest adventure of his life was far from over. Unlikely heroes. Dr. Emmett Hawthorne had faced many challenges in his long life, but none quite like this. Surrounded by towering alien invaders, their emotionless masks reflecting the eerie light of the twin moons, he fought to keep his fear at bay. "Now, gentlemen," Emmett said, his voice remarkably steady, "I'm sure we can come to some sort of understanding. I'm just a simple botanist after all." The aliens made no response, but their weapons remained trained on him. Emmett's mind raced, searching for a way out of this predicament. He had to keep them distracted, had to give Starlight time to get far away. Suddenly, an idea struck him. It was risky, perhaps even foolhardy, but it was all he had. "You know," he continued, slowly reaching into his pocket, "I've been studying the local flora. Fascinating stuff. Would you like to see a sample?" Before the aliens could react, Emmett pulled out a small vial of the plant toxin he had prepared earlier. In one swift motion, he uncorked it and flung the contents at the nearest invader. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The alien let out a high-pitched shriek, its limbs flailing wildly. The others recoiled, clearly unprepared for this primitive but effective attack. Seizing his chance, Emmett darted between two of the stunned aliens and sprinted towards the forest. His old legs protested, but fear and adrenaline propelled him forward. Behind him, he could hear the aliens recovering, their strange, fluid movements pursuit. As he plunged into the dense undergrowth, Emmett's scientific mind couldn't help but marvel at the aliens' adaptability. They moved through the difficult terrain with ease, their multiple limbs finding purchase where he struggled. "Getting too old for this," Emmett muttered to himself, ducking under a low-hanging branch. He had no real plan beyond leading the invaders away from Starlight, but he was quickly running out of stamina. Just as he felt his strength beginning to fail, a small blue hand reached out from behind a large bulbous plant, pulling him into a hidden hollow. Emmett found himself face to face with Starlight, the alien child's eyes wide with concern. "I told you to run," Emmett whispered, even as relief flooded through him. Starlight simply shook its head, placing a hand on Emmett's cheek. In a flash of shared thought, Emmett understood. The child couldn't bear to leave him behind. Their moment of reunion was cut short by the sound of the alien invaders approaching. Emmett held his breath, pulling Starlight close. They were trapped, with nowhere left to run. Just as all seemed lost, something extraordinary happened. The plants around them began to move, their leaves and vines intertwining to form a dense, protective barrier. Emmett watched in amazement as the alien invaders passed by their hiding spot, apparently unable to detect them through the living shield. Once the danger had passed, Emmett turned to Starlight in astonishment. "Did you do that?" he asked, gesturing to the plants. Starlight nodded, a look of concentration on its delicate features. It placed its hand on Emmett's cheek again, sharing a stream of images and sensations. Emmett saw Starlight's homeworld, where the inhabitants lived in harmony with the plant life, able to communicate with and direct it through some form of telepathy. "Incredible," Emmett breathed. "You're full of surprises, aren't you, little one?" Their relief was short-lived, however. In the distance, they could hear the alien invaders regrouping, preparing for a more thorough search. They needed a plan, and fast. Emmett's mind whirred into action. "Starlight," he said, an idea forming. Can you communicate with all the plants here? The alien child nodded, chirping affirmatively. Excellent. Emmett grinned. I think I know how we can turn the tables on our unfriendly visitors. Over the next hour, as the alien invaders combed the forest, Emmett and Starlight put their plan into action. Using Starlight's unique abilities and Emmett's botanical knowledge, they prepared a series of traps and diversions throughout the dense alien jungle. Vines were coaxed into tripwires, pollen-heavy flowers were positioned to release blinding clouds of spores, and carnivorous plants were encouraged to grow to monstrous sizes. All the while, Emmett marveled at the seamless way Starlight communicated with the local flora, guiding and shaping it with gentle mental nudges. As they worked, Emmett couldn't help but reflect on the strange turns his life had taken. Here he was, a retired botanist from Earth, working alongside an alien child to outwit an invading force on a distant world. It was terrifying, exhilarating, and utterly unlike anything he had ever experienced. Finally, their preparations complete, Emmett turned to Starlight. "Ready?" he asked, holding out his hand. Starlight took it, its small fingers intertwining with his gnarled ones. The alien child's touch conveyed a mix of fear and determination that mirrored Emmett's own emotions. Together, they emerged from their hiding place. Emmett cupped his hands around his mouth and shouted, "Over here, you overgrown weed whackers." The reaction was immediate. The alien invaders converged on their position, moving with that unsettling, fluid grace. But this time, Emmett and Starlight were ready for them. As the first alien approached, a giant vine whipped out, wrapping around its legs and hoisting it into the air. Another stepped into a cloud of pollen, its movements becoming erratic as it struggled to see. A third found itself suddenly engulfed by an enormous, pitcher-like plant, its limbs flailing uselessly. Emmett couldn't help but laugh as chaos erupted around them. "That's it, Starlight," he cheered. "Show them what happens when they mess with a botanist and his gardener." Starlight chirped excitedly, its skin glowing with exertion as it directed the plants in their defense. The alien invaders, for all their advanced technology, found themselves completely outmatched by the combined power of nature and the unlikely duo's ingenuity. As the last of the invaders fell into a particularly nasty patch of sticky sap, Emmett turned to Starlight with a triumphant grin. "We did it, little one. We actually did it." But their victory celebration was cut short by a low, ominous hum. Looking up, they saw the alien ship rising above the tree line, a massive cannon on its underside beginning to glow with ominous energy. Emmett's heart sank. They had won the battle. But the war was far from over. As the ship's weapon powered up, he pulled Starlight close, determined to protect the child to his last breath. "Well," he said, forcing a smile, "I don't suppose you have any giant, spaceship-eating plants up your sleeve." Starlight looked up at him, its large eyes filled with a mixture of fear and was that mischief. The alien child reached out, touching Emmett's cheek one more time. The vision that flooded his mind left him speechless. "You can't be serious," Emmett gasped. But as the ship's weapon reached full power, he realized they had no other choice. "All right, little one. Let's give it a try, together." Starlight nodded, and as one, they turned to face the looming threat above them. Whatever happened next, Emmett knew that this unlikely partnership, this blossoming family, would face it united. The fate of two worlds now rested in the hands of an old botanist and a remarkable alien child. As the ship's cannon prepared to fire, Emmett and Starlight raised their hands in unison, ready to unleash the full power of the alien world's flora in one last desperate gambit. A new family. As the alien ship's weapon reached full charge, Emmett and Starlight stood their ground, hands raised in unison. The forest around them seemed to hold its breath, an unnatural stillness descending over the alien landscape. Then, with a burst of psychic energy that Emmett felt rather than saw, Starlight reached out to the planet itself. The ground beneath their feet began to tremble, and for a moment, Emmett feared they had made a terrible mistake. But as he watched in awe, massive roots erupted from the earth, reaching towards the sky like gargantuan tentacles. They wrapped around the alien ship, their grip impossibly strong. The ship's engines whined in protest, but it was no match for the raw power of the planet's flora. Emmett laughed in disbelief. "It's working. Starlight, you magnificent little miracle, it's actually working." The alien child's skin glowed with an intense, pulsating light as it channeled more and more energy. The roots continued to grow, completely encasing the ship in a cocoon of living matter. Slowly but surely, they began to pull it down towards the ground. Just as it seemed victory was within their grasp, a blinding beam of energy shot from the ship's cannon. Emmett's heart leaped into his throat as he realized it was aimed directly at them. Without thinking, he threw himself in front of Starlight, determined to protect the child with his own body if necessary. But the blast never reached them. At the last possible second, a wall of dense vegetation sprang up before them, absorbing the full force of the attack. The plants withered and smoked, but they had done their job. Starlight looked up at Emmett, its eyes wide with gratitude and affection. Emmett felt a lump form in his throat. "We make a pretty good team, don't we?" he said softly. Their moment of connection was interrupted by a thunderous crash. The alien ship, finally overcome by the relentless pull of the roots, slammed into the ground. A cloud of dust and debris billowed up, obscuring their view. As the dust settled, Emmett and Starlight cautiously approached the downed ship. The once sleek vessel was now a twisted wreck, completely entangled in a mesh of roots and vines. Of the alien invaders, there was no sign. "Well," Emmett said, breaking the silence, "I don't think they'll be bothering us again anytime soon." Starlight chirped in agreement, then suddenly swayed on its feet. Emmett quickly scooped up the alien child, noticing how cool its skin felt to the touch. "You've overdone it, little one," he said gently. "Let's get you back to the station and rested." As they made their way back through the now quiet forest, Emmett's mind raced with the implications of what had just occurred. They had repelled an advanced alien invasion force using nothing but botanical knowledge and Starlight's unique abilities. It was the stuff of science fiction, yet he had lived it. Back at the research station, Emmett tucked an exhausted Starlight into his bunk. As the alien child drifted off to sleep, Emmett sat beside it, gently stroking its iridescent skin. "What am I going to do with you?" he murmured softly. The rational part of his mind knew he should be contacting Earth, reporting this incredible first contact and the subsequent invasion attempt. But his heart told a different story. In the weeks they had spent together, Starlight had become more than just an alien curiosity or a scientific subject. The child had filled a void in Emmett's life he hadn't even known existed. And now the thought of giving Starlight up to be studied and prodded by Earth scientists was unbearable. As if sensing his turmoil, Starlight stirred in its sleep, reaching out to touch Emmett's hand. A wave of emotions washed over him: trust, affection, and a deep sense of belonging. In that moment, Emmett made his decision. When Starlight awoke hours later, Emmett was waiting with a warm smile and a steaming mug of nutrient broth. "Feeling better?" he asked, helping the child sit up. Starlight nodded, accepting the mug with a grateful chirp. As it sipped the broth, Emmett took a deep breath. "Starlight," he began, "I've been thinking. Your home is gone, and Earth, well, Earth might not be ready for someone as special as you just yet." He paused, gathering his courage. "How would you feel about staying here with me? We could be a family, you and I, different species, different worlds, but family all the same." Starlight's eyes widened, and for a moment, Emmett feared he had overstepped. Then the alien child launched itself into his arms, nearly spilling the broth. A torrent of joyous emotions flooded Emmett's mind: acceptance, relief, and overwhelming happiness. Laughing, Emmett hugged Starlight close. "I'll take that as a yes," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Over the next few months, Emmett and Starlight fell into a comfortable routine. By day, they explored the alien world together, Emmett cataloging new plant species while Starlight communed with the local flora. In the evenings, they would sit outside the research station, watching the twin suns set as Emmett told stories of Earth and Starlight shared memories of its lost homeworld. Emmett sent regular reports back to Earth, detailing his botanical discoveries, but making no mention of Starlight or the alien invasion. He knew that one day the truth would have to come out. But for now, he was content to protect this small, miraculous family they had forged. As for the wrecked alien ship, nature quickly reclaimed it. Within weeks, it was overgrown with the planet's vibrant plant life, becoming just another part of the landscape. Emmett and Starlight would sometimes visit it, a reminder of the day their unlikely partnership had saved two worlds. One evening, as they sat watching the stars come out, Starlight tugged at Emmett's sleeve. The alien child pointed to a particularly bright star, then touched Emmett's cheek. In his mind, Emmett saw a vision of the two of them in a ship, exploring new worlds together. Emmett smiled, pulling Starlight close. "You want to go exploring, do you?" he asked. "Well, why not? The universe is a big place, and we got all the time in the world." As the alien night deepened around them, Dr. Emmett Hawthorne and his adopted alien child sat together, two unlikely heroes dreaming of the adventures yet to come. They had found each other across the vastness of space, forged a family in the face of incredible odds, and in doing so, had opened the door to a future filled with endless possibilities. The stars twinkled overhead, seeming to wink at the odd pair. An old human botanist and a young alien child, united by love, curiosity, and the unbreakable bonds of their newfound family. Whatever challenges the universe might throw at them next, they would face them together, two hearts beating as one under alien skies.